Chapter 13. Sarah Malloy, who was soft and plumply rounded as a feather bed, smiled and hugged Frances as they were introduced. It's a wonderful thing you're doing, helping these parents for orphans and waifs. She's helping find parents for orphans and waifs, she said. I'm glad I was able to rely on the committee, Frances answered. I'd never been able to figure it out among all these people which would be good parents and which wouldn't. Sarah's eyebrows rose and wiggled as though she had new secrets no one else could know. Huh, she sniffed. I'm afraid the committee can be counted on just so far. What do you mean? Frances asked. Think about it. Is Zeke Coley, who owns a feed store, going to tell you not to give a child to a good customer, even though he knows the man's after a free farm worker, nothing more? Or will Effie Jerome snitch on her best friend, even though she knows her friend has a temper and can't be matched, has been known to take a heavy switch to unruly children? Frances pressed her hand against her painful knot that suddenly appeared in her chest. If I'd made some mistakes, maybe it's not too late to correct them, if you'll give me the names. Sheriff Malloy tossed his hat at the top of the coat rack and stood just inside the front door of the small, cozy living room. Now, Sarah, don't go stirring up Miss Kelly about something that didn't happen. I was there. I saw who got the folk. They were all good, law-abiding folk. Whatever you say, Sarah said pleasantly. She busily straightened the lacy antimacassar that sprawled over the back of a nearby upholstered chair, as if she wanted to show that she didn't really agree with her husband. Miss Kelly, she beckoned toward the short hallway, put your hat and baggage in the first bedroom. You'll share it with the girls. Eddie can sleep on a pallet in the front of the fireplace in the living room. Join me in the kitchen. I'll make you fried chicken and mashed potatoes for supper, and you can lend me a hand if you don't mind. Not at all. You're very kind, Mrs. Malloy. You may call me Sarah, dear. Then please call me Frances, she replied. Frances made sure Eddie was comfortable before she went to help Sarah with supper. Will Seth Connolly come back? Like they think? Eddie asked. No, he won't, Frances answered. He's too smart to try a senseless act like that. She rubbed his hair as she added, and all you've got to worry about is how much Mrs. Malloy's chicken and mashed potatoes you'll be able to eat. Eddie relaxed enough to smile, so Frances left him and walked to the kitchen. She had questions for Sarah, but didn't have to ask them. Sarah wanted to know about every child chosen. She had comments to make about each set of foster parents. Frances was prepared to learn the worst, but with relief, she soon found that Sarah's remarks were no more damaging than the little tittle-tattle that went on at church suppers. Oh, she makes out to be a frugal one, but it's the fact that she sews fancy lace on her bloomers. She won first prize for apple pie, but wasn't her recipe at all. It was her sister's. A well-dressed feller came around claiming to be his brother, and he didn't have his nose in the air, but it turned out they weren't brothers at all, but second cousins, and the cousin had walked down on his wife and his 6 children. Sarah glanced sidelong at Frances. That robber that John thinks might come back, how'd you get to know him? He was a passenger in our car on the train, Frances answered. Sarah rolled her eyes. You took up with a strange man on the train? Frances ignored the shock in Sarah's voice. No, I didn't take up with anyone. Half a dozen adults sat in the seats in the rear of our car. Mr. Connolly was one of them. He must have talked to you. He must have told you what he planned to do. Sarah was so intent on hearing what Frances had to say that the chicken pieces started and sizzling in the pan began to burn. Frances wrapped a towel around her hand and slid a large, heavy iron skillet to one side of the stove. Sarah, embarrassed, jumped to turn the pieces so they would brown evenly. Knowing that Sarah would keep her until she answered her questions, Frances said, He told us just before he left the train he was going to take Eddie hostage. I stopped him. My land, Sarah exclaimed. Weren't you afraid? Yes, I was. And aren't you afraid now they might come back? Frances thought a moment. Seth was intelligent. There was much he'd learned as a soldier, and when to hide, when to pick the right time to make his move. He wouldn't return to Harwood for her. It'd be too dangerous for him. If he came for her, it'd probably be after she arrived back at home. Yes, alone, she decided. That would be just the time and place. Frances knew this just as certainly as if she had received a mental message from Seth. Cold chills ran up her back when she shivered. There, I knew you were afraid, Sarah said with satisfaction, but you don't have to worry. What else could be safer than the sheriff's own home? Soon the Malloys' 2 daughters were called inside to supper. The older, about 14, Frances guessed, washed at the pump at the back door. It was obvious the younger, who must have been no more than 7, settled for some hasty splashes in her face, leaving streaks of dirt. We've got company, Sarah said. She moistened the end of a towel and scrubbed hard at her squirming daughter's face. As she helped carry platters of food to the sturdy table that filled one corner of the living room, Frances saw with surprise that she and Eddie weren't the only guests for supper. A brawny man with a gray beard slowly unwound his long legs and raised himself from a low, upholstered chair to greet her. I'd like you to meet Sheriff Duncan from over in Clay County, Miss Kelly, Sheriff Malloy said. I've been filling him in on Seth Connolly in case he shows up in western Missouri. Sheriff Duncan's voice rumbled deep within his throat. Pleased to meet you, Miss Kelly. We'll do our best to catch Connolly. Don't you worry none. Thank you, Frances murmured. She fumbled with the chair while Sarah directed her to sit, hoping she wouldn't be asked about Seth. What could she tell them? That he was a bitter, unforgiving man, bent on revenge? No, there was more to it than that. There was still goodness in Seth. He had proved it when he had done what she'd asked and hadn't taken Eddie. Sheriff Malloy sniffed appreciatively at the steaming platter of fried chicken, bowed his head and said a very quick grace. Plates were passed and filled. Francis was gratified to see Eddie begin eating without hesitation. He appeared to be bouncing back from the hurt of not being chosen at first stop. He'd be in good spirits tomorrow, she was sure. During dinner, the two men dominated the conversation. Between mouthfuls, Sheriff Duncan began talking about the robbery at Clay County Savings Association back in February. It was one of the first bank robberies for Frank and Jesse James and their gang, Sheriff Malloy added. Now wait, there's some doubt that James' gang were the ones who done it, Sheriff Duncan told him. We got witnesses that swore Frank was in Kentucky at the time and Jesse was homesick in bed. Nobody on the scene recognized the James brothers? Oh, sure, we got witnesses who will swear the boys were there. We just have to figure who's telling the truth and who isn't. Eddie, obviously fascinated by what the men were saying, looked back and forth from each of them. Francis sighed. This was not the kind of conversation impressionable young boys should be hearing. Sheriff Malloy chuckled. Maybe you should get Wild Bill Hickok into it. You heard what happened over in Springfield, didn't you? About him shooting someone named Tut who won Bill's watch fair and square at a poker game? Yeah, the way I heard it, next day he stood at the corner of the public square, right smack in the middle of the city, waited 2 hours for Tut to come by, called him out, shot him in the heart. Eddie gasped, his mouth dropped open. When's Bill going to be up for trial? I don't know. Chances are he'll be acquitted. Tut could be lucky if he got off the first. What could have been lucky if he got off the first shot. Frances put down her fork. He killed a man over a watch, she said indignantly. There was an argument somewhere in there too, Sheriff Duncan said. No matter. Frances said he killed a man. He should go to prison. We're talking about Wild Bill Hickok, ma'am. Sheriff Duncan said in surprise. He's pretty well known for helping to bring law and order all the way into Kansas. Surely you've heard of him. Yes, I have, but it doesn't matter how well known he is. Frances said a murderer should go to jail. Sheriff Duncan spoke slowly as though he were trying to explain something difficult to understand. But it wasn't murder, ma'am. It was a call-out. Either man could have shot first. Bill did, Tut didn't. Simple as that. Eddie nodded solemnly along with the men. Kill or be killed? Francis said. That's not what life's about. Sheriff Malloy broke in, speaking to his friend. Women don't understand these things, he said. I think Sarah's even given up trying, so there's no use explaining. Francis glanced at Sarah. I'm very tired, she said. May I please be excused, Eddie, too? I'm not tired, Eddie said. He edged his chair a little closer to Sheriff Duncan. Yes, you are, Francis told him, and we have to rise early tomorrow to get underway. Sarah added, make yourself comfortable in the girls' room. The girls will share the bottom half of the trundle bed. You take the top. I'll make a pallet for you near the fireplace. I'm not sleepy, Eddie complained. Good, Sarah said. Then you can help the girls wash the dishes. Satisfied that Eddie wouldn't be subjected to an evening filled with stories about outlaws, Frances left the room. After she removed her tightly laced corset, she happily rubbed her back and sighed with relief. She changed into a nightdress and a robe and washed her hands and face and arms. It was the first time she'd been able to change her clothing since she'd left New York City. Before she crawled into the bed under one of Sarah's neatly pieced quilts, Frances opened her journal. In the light of an oil lamp, she wrote about what had happened on the train, and she wrote about the children who'd been chosen. And she wrote about what she had been longing to write about, but had pushed aside, her love for Johnny. Johnny and Seth, they're so much alike in spite of being Union and Confederate in their feelings. If they'd met on a battlefield, they would have tried to kill each other. If I tried to point out similarities, they'd hotly deny they had anything in common. Yet both are wrapped up in cocoons of resentment and hatred. Nothing else seems important to them. Seth's goal is revenge, and I pray that Johnny doesn't take the same path. Johnny refused me, so in turn I refused him. Was I right to do so? I don't want to lose him. I can't. Isn't love stronger than hatred? I just hope that somehow I have the chance to prove that that's true. At mid-morning, after a hearty breakfast, Francis and Eddie returned to the depot, accompanied by Sheriff Malloy. He plopped down on the platform a heavy basket of fresh biscuits, cheese, apple cake that Sarah had packed for the children and surveyed the area around the depot. Sarah doesn't understand I can't be a pack horse and a watchdog too, he said. Don't see Connolly around, do you? No, Francis answered. The sheriff kept his eyes on the window in the small building and added, I'll just have a quick look around. Many of the children were already arrived. Francis greeted them eagerly and thanked the kind people who had given them shelter for the night. Soon all the names on her list were checked off, except one, 5-year-old Walter Emmerich. Can't leave without Walter, Francis told the sheriff Malloy. Is there someone who could be sent after him? The sheriff smiled and pointed up the road. There's Jake and Effie Kleinhurst coming now, and they've got a little boy with them. Is that Walter? Yes, Francis said. Thank goodness. As Jake Kleinhaus stopped at the wagon, his wife jumped out, not waiting to be helped. She picked up her skirts and ran to the dust towards Francis. She was a small, thin woman and shyly ducked her head. She said, I thought about asking for one of the children. I wasn't sure if we should or not. I didn't know how it would turn out, but what if the child wasn't happy? Or what if Jake and me weren't happy? In the distance, a train whistle blew, and the children clustered more tightly around Francis. Jake and Walter in tow hurried with his wife. Come with me, Effie, Jake said. Effie Kleinhurst raised her voice and spoke rapidly. Please, miss. Walter's the child Jake and I have dreamed of having. Please, not too late, is it? Can we take Walter to raise? Francis smiled at Walter. Is that what you'd like, Walter? Yes, Walter said, and raised his arm up to Jake. Pick me up, Papa, he said. I'll vouch for the Kleinhurst. Sheriff Malloy told him they've got a good-sized farm. They'll make the boy happy. Jake's face burned with pleasure. I'm going to get Walter a pony, he said. Francis rummaged through a carpet bag and found the right papers, and with the Kleinhurst help, filled them out as the train chugged into the depot. She hugged Walter goodbye and helped the other children up the steps into the car. It's a short trip, she told him. We'll be in Springbrook soon after lunch. While the children settled into the chairs, Frances quickly glanced around the car. Don't be ridiculous, she told herself as she realized she'd been looking for Seth. Sheriff Malloy put the heavy basket next to the rack of baggage and shook Frances's hand. You'll be careful now, you hear, he said. I will, Frances told him. I'm willing to bet you haven't seen the last of that young man. Frances didn't answer. She secretly agreed. Last night she'd been sure Seth would wait until she arrived home, but that is if he decided to put in an appearance. But now she wasn't so positive. Seth was impulsive, and he would be angry. It was possibly to intercept her en route. The conductor's going to watch out for you, and I telegraphed the sheriff's department near Springbrook to keep an eye on you and that boy while you're there, Sheriff Malloy assured her. Thank you, Frances Anna tried to keep her voice from trembling. I don't think we'll have any trouble. Maybe not, Sheriff Malloy said, but it's best to keep an eye out and get to it before it gets started. Irrationally, Frances wanted to laugh after he left the railway car. The sheriff sounded as if he were reporting an approaching storm. In his own way, Seth is a storm, she realized, and for the first time she wondered what she'd say or do if he did suddenly appear.